almost nothing is really said about it by the guys that this thing is going to affect you and I. So who's doing it and who is controlling this so powerfully that most ordinary people can't actually discuss something of such immense consequence, if you see what I'm trying to say. Here are these chaps saying, colonels and whatever, trained to observe, that they actually came across something that was out of this kilter of our world, you know, if you see what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
so,
well, you explained it in the book about Rendlesham.
Absolutely.
Those guys are trained to know the difference between a lighthouse and something else.
That's right. And, you know, they'll come at you from all kinds. There's skeptics of all sorts. You can rent a skeptic. And the problem is that when you take that counterpoint of view, either it's genetically coded in you and against good sense, or you can use a very simple device, neutral, logical reason, and then walk that road, if you see what I'm trying to say. And I think I try to do that in the books as sincerely and as strongly as I possibly could. In fact, you know, it was a real kind of ethos for me that I had to kind of grit my teeth and look at. And the more I began to do that, the clearer it became, and the more relaxed I got, and good heavens, you know, it's some story to tell. It's taken me 3 books to do it. The third one's just finished. But the fact is that that's really why the thing is so heavy, because there's so much you have to put in, you know. You leave something out, someone will say, but what about this, and so forth. So we try to account for as much as possible with the questions we anticipate that people might ask, if you see what I mean. Sorry about that long spiel, but there you go.
Well, the thing is, I mean, are your colleagues now coming round to the idea that there's other things? You know, more learned people now dipping their toe in and trying to investigate like you are.
Oh, it's got to do that. It has to do that. And Andrew wants to say something here.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt if you look at the wealth of evidence going throughout the centuries and millennia, even that mankind is not alone in the universe. I mean, even, you know, cosmologists and biologists have come to this conclusion anyway, and there's plenty of evidence that this planet has been visited many times, and in recent times there have been times when there have been mass sightings that, you know, thousands of people have seen together. So, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that that these creatures are already here. Yeah,
and the whole point is this. There is an awful lot of evidence that's come to my hand before I put it on paper from very reliable sources really high up in the American and Soviet hierarchy of things, some military and so on, that have confidentially spoken to me, no names, of course, but spoken and said that these things are here. They have the foolproof evidence of it, physical evidence of it, and they are what really surprised me to start with. They are, in fact, robots. They are biological robots. They're not living being in the organic sense, shall we say, that we normally kind of view, or, you know, you and I. And so well, maybe my wife has a different view on that, whether I'm actually human or not. But the fact is that, I mean, I perceive myself to be human. I'm sure you do too. But in the normal biological sense, we have to take ourselves to be something that is different from a created, mechanized, albeit with kind of soft biological. I mean, you can make a transistor now based upon, you know, organic chemistry, if you see what I'm trying to say. Yep. You have all kinds of ways now in technology of making robots and so on. We're doing it here on this earth. Can you imagine a civilization that might be 10,000 years ahead of us? And we've done that on 150 years of technology, you know. I mean, you know, it was only in 1905 that the Wright brothers first managed to get off the ground. And look at us now, if you see what I'm trying to say, how the exponential growth of technology can lead to immense developments and so forth. So I'm sure that out there in some planet in our galaxy, and many planets in our galaxy, this business is going on. And what I discovered, I believe, is that this is a normal business of the universe. We've just happened on it and begun to understand it. And these things have been here for thousands of years. And in fact, as you follow the evidence back, that's the thing that actually really blew my mind. I'm absolutely convinced that the entire human species was genetically engineered sometime in the past to produce something for a program of an alien entity, that we are, in fact, the lab rats.
Yeah.
And that, of course, means I look at my children, and I'm sure you have children too. Are you? Do you?
I do, yes.
Well, there you go. So that's really the purpose of it. I want to be able to look at my children and say, now, look, you know, I'm gone, I leave your house or whatever, but, you know, I've left you nothing, really, basically, if I can't tell you what your future might be or whatever. So that basically, but not to sound too pious, but that is what motivated me as a dad, if you like, you know, to try and say, this is the way I see the world now. You might find a different story, but take a look at it. And that's why I say with the book, don't be frightened about its weight and all the rest of it. Give it a good go, Ian. See if you can follow the thing through. It might surprise you.
I will read it through to the very end. I mean, in the book, you set the stage very well at the beginning of the book, talking about entropy and the way that things break down, you know, using the second law of thermodynamics. And I think it'd be good if you could just sort of set the stage here, really, before you move on to the next part of the conversation. So
the point is this: second law of thermodynamics. Dr. Silverman would like to take this on.
Yeah, I mean, from a science point of view, the second law of thermodynamics is basically predicated on the idea that at the start of the universe, everything came from order. That at the Big Bang, everything was very simple and symmetrical and ordered. And from then, everything has been flying apart, becoming more and more complicated and broken down. And it's always one way. Things never get back together again of themselves. You can, if you watch a film going forwards or backwards, you can tell which way it was happening. If you see bits of broken glass come up off the floor and gather together into a glass on a table, you know you're watching it backwards, and you know you're watching it backwards because things always happen the reverse way round. It always goes from order into chaos. And what this implies to the scientists who have studied it in more depth is that everything must have come from a perfect, exceedingly unlikely state of order right at the beginning. It's so unlikely that if you had one with 100 noughts on the end of it and just it's so much less than a needle in a haystack, how precisely ordered everything had to be at the start to allow this to happen. Now, if that's the case, if everything is breaking down from order into chaos, this actually fits well into what Darwin said, but not in the way that people think, because what Darwin said is that the fittest to survive will survive. And so people think, oh yeah, well, that's how man arose out of the ape, which came out of the sea worm, which came out of the bacterium and whatever. But actually, if you actually think about it, the reverse is true, because as Nigel points out in his books, the fittest thing to continue existing in this universe is not human beings who are just around for a few decades. Things like rocks can be there for hundreds of millions of years. How is it that if there were a nuclear holocaust, the things that would survive wouldn't be human beings, they'd be cockroaches? And in fact, you can make quite a good case biologically that this planet is actually dominated not by us, but by insects who have the most, complicated and advanced adaptive form. So actually, the second law of thermodynamics does point that the things that will survive physically in terms of living things are much more likely to have lesser of a capacity to be deeper or have free thought in the sense that human beings do. And as Nigel points out in his book, the apes and monkeys are far more likely to be ahead of us than behind us in evolution.
Ahead not in the sense of development, but ahead in the sense of going to more, following the second law of thermodynamics. I think that the ape comes from us and we don't come from the ape. I think it's much more logical, if you really look at this, that there was some marvelous light being from which, as the universe, randomized into chaotic mechanisms, so on, with time, through the second law of thermodynamics, things got worse as we go along. And in fact, that's what cosmology is saying now. Yeah, and it's simply saying that one day, this universe, everything will be unraveled, even the minutest particles, subatomic particles, and we will get a cold face of nothingness, of absolute zero, to no purpose whatsoever. Now, what on earth does that mean? Here are we, figuring all this out. We come in the middle of it all, and then suddenly it's all gone. And people must be completely puzzled by all this, you know. So I looked at this and I thought to myself, now where is the reasoning behind this? It can't just be that useless a purpose, because it just does not make intuitive sense, if you like. And there are many people